Hey guys, welcome back. We are with Jemmy Lee. Jemmy is one of our realtors.
Hi.
Most of you probably know Jemmy. Jemmy's on. I want to do a shout out for this too because you are also a volunteer with the Crub Charitable Foundation.
I am.
And you guys did such a great job for everyone at the Realty Roundup.
So glad that you guys all enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thanks for that. Okay, but you are here because we are talking about community stuff. So amenities, schooling, all that jazz. You have really gone above and beyond to become a bit of an expert on community facilities and schooling. I don't worry. She said she hates when I say that word, but you are. You're so smart, and you do a great job with answering people's question when it comes to living life as a family in a community.
Yes.
So we thought that we would chat with you about that today.
Well, I'm gonna preface this by saying that Ryan was definitely a hard one to follow. I'm definitely a little. This is exciting information about schools, and he had titles. He managed to make titles not dry at all. And I'm going to make this really boring compared to what he just did.
No, you are not. Do not even worry about it. All right. Well, let's kick it off.
When it comes to educating your clients on communities and schools,
Yeah.
Are you a person that generally, from your experience, because you've been an agent for a while, do you know the whole city? Do you focus on certain communities? Like, how do you
Not
do it?
everyone knows every single, crevice of the city, but I'm definitely, I've been around the city. I'm born and raised here, so I know how it's grown. And I definitely know, and this is something that I think is really, really important to everybody, is to make sure that you study the trends, read the Avenue magazines, what's the up-and-coming, trending communities, and know the audience, right? I concentrate on a lot of move-up clients where they're moving out of the condo scene, trying to get out of the inner city and trying to know where to go. And so, right now I find that a lot of my clients are trending towards certain communities. So knowing that right off the top of your head is always nice. And then I definitely start asking questions of where someone wants to be, and ask the questions of what their focus is on. And then from there I do some research and give them the lowdown.
That makes sense. So let's kind of start talking about schools specifically.
Okay.
Because people with families, if they're either children going into school for the first time, making those decisions, oftentimes people are making decisions on the community they move into based on the educational system, or if they're leaving a certain community and they're going to be pulling their kids out of school, going to another school, the education aspect is extremely important.
Totally.
So how are you a resource for people in that situation when it comes to schooling? What information are you researching? What type of questions are people asking?
So I always want to make sure that, and I tell clients as well, to take the information I have with a grain of salt, because the Fraser Institute is a really, really good resource for me. I start reading up on what a good school is in the public system, what one is for the private system, and what their needs are. If they want a school that is a private school, know them off the top of your head, the top 10 or so, and know which ones fall in that category. It's always good to know, it's with a grain of salt, like I said. I had one family when I met them, and they were actually the ones that started me on delving into more of the information. They knew the Fraser Institute list from top to bottom, right off the bat, and I was the one standing there with doe eyes going, oh my goodness, you guys know this? Their kid was 2. And
wow.
So
not even in school.
No, not even in school, and they were making life decisions based upon when they wanted their child to go to school, what point in time, and 3 years down the road, but they wanted to be in the community early on. And I told them that after reading through it, the results from the Fraser list are a year old. They come from, results from, right now they're releasing at 2017 numbers. 2018, the school year just finished, they won't have those numbers released until December, January.
Right.
And so what happens is, teachers change. The school board systems move teachers around, principals around all the time. And, sometimes those dictate, how well the children learn. Bless you.
Yes.
And so that's really, really important as well, is to make sure that you tell the clients that you can't just base it upon that. I mean, the first set of clients with their 2-year-old, by the time their child gets to school age, things may have changed drastically.
Yes.
And I've seen that on the list because I've been following for several years now.
Yep.
And where their child wanted to go to school, that's dropped down the list to, number 15, 16, when it was
Right.
originally number 2 in the city for a long
Wow.
time. Yeah, and so it definitely changes.
Can parents get their kids on multiple waiting lists?
Not that I know of, and that's something that's really important too, is even though we're trying to help them as realtors to find a school in a district, don't take the onus on yourself. Make sure that the parents and your buyers, research and
Definitely.
verify with the school ahead of time.
Yep.
Does this house fall in the category? If it's super important to them, they need to verify that. And sometimes, even though you fall in a certain district and it's your designated school, once they're overloaded, they send you to a different school. Like, for
Right.
example, and this is something that's really important, like, for example, Acadia or Bonavista, these schools get all the feeders from Auburn Bay and Mahogany because there's only one school in that area to support.
Yes.
And like Auburn Bay, Mahogany, they don't have a school. They go to Cranston. And so when that school gets overloaded by all the communities like surrounding it, they send them to, they get bused to Bonavista, which
Right.
is really far.
Especially for little kids.
I know, for little children to get bused over there, it's almost a 45-minute-hour bus ride. And is that something they want to do? Or if they're going to end up at that school, maybe we should look in a different neighborhood and something that's closer. Or I point out that sometimes it's nice to be in a community where there's a school but less children going to it, because then their kids actually get more attention from the teachers, and that may
Yes.
help bring up the numbers as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Interesting.
And one interesting thing, and you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, if I recall, for schools that don't have a grade 6 program, I don't believe that they register to the Fraser Institute
They
ratings
don't.
at all
No.
because they don't have the testing.
Yeah.
So my kids, my son, he goes to a school that only goes up to grade 5. And because of that, the school doesn't even register on the Fraser Institute.
Yeah.
And it's a great school.
And
But if I
that's the thing, it gets
so-
missed.
Yep.
And sometimes if they have less than 10 children that go to a certain grade, because they only test for grade 3, grade 6, and then grade 9 and 12. And I
Right.
think 9 they took off the Fraser list, it's only 12 now. So when they do that and you have 10 or less children that like write that exam,
Right.
they don't register either for
Very
the
interesting.
Fraser Institute. So.
And personally, I'd love it if my kid went to a school with only 10 kids in the grade 6
Right?
class.
I know.
All the attention, all the help,
So
that'd be amazing.
yeah, the focus is not like one teacher, and the quota
That's
and
right.
ratios are different.
Yeah.
So depending on where somebody wants to move, do you find that you make schooling recommendations?
I do. I still want to point it out to them because you want to show the value of you being a realtor and being an expert. I had one client, they're now selling their home. And they contacted me because they bought a home that they thought was really great. Their previous realtor loved the house and helped them buy it, and they did really, really great. And they realized there is no school in their neighborhood. So they've got 3 school-age children that go to 3 different schools because they're all in different grades that go to different designated schools.
Yep.
And she's like, I can't do this anymore. We have to take one, pick the other one up. It's
Yep.
so
Yeah.
bad. And so right off the bat, I say, like, if they've got little children coming to the showings, you
Yeah.
point that out. If they look like they're a young couple and they're going to start a family, you still point that out. It's something that you want to point out to people also for resale value, because
Yeah.
if you're in a neighborhood with no kids, that might be a detrimental thing for the value of the home long term.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you got to think, should parents be thinking about this? Yes, they should. But the process of buying a home is exciting and overwhelming. And if they've got younger kids, they might not quite, they might think, the school will come within a few years.
I just,
But what if
I
it
would have
doesn't?
just always assumed that there would be a school in a community your kid would go to. Like, without somebody telling me otherwise, I think you would just assume that that's what the government and your taxes goes towards, is the fact that, like, there's a school in the community that, like, I would never think about
Yeah.
it.
But then sometimes the schools that come are a different designation.
Yeah.
Maybe a Catholic school
Or
is coming to your
French.
area.
There's a
Maybe
lot of
it's a
French
public.
schools.
Yeah, so there's like Francophone as well, schools that you want to make sure that they're designated to a different, like, I know some people that live in Acadia specifically for the Francophone school. Their Scenic Acres just opened one because there was a need in the Northwest, and that's an elementary school,
Yes.
and a lot of people buy in Scenic Acres. But it's good to know why someone's in a neighborhood and why, or why they're kind of coming from that aspect and that point.
Yeah.
And you along with schools, you also kind of tie that back into the safety of the area and
Yes.
whether or not, it's kid friendly, if there's
Yep.
parks and stuff.
So yeah, so let's keeping with the school idea, but moving a little bit to the amenity standpoint, because you're great with families. What type of amenities? Obviously, a little bit above the fact, they have a park, but even from community associations, rec programs, that kind of
Totally.
stuff. Is that the type of thing that if you're really working within a few communities that you know
Yes.
quite well?
I definitely recommend knowing the community association and knowing what the fees are, what it involves, and what you're getting out of it, so that there's value added for a client that lives in that neighborhood.
Give me one example of a community where you'd be like, the
Like
amenities would
Auburn
be amazing.
Bay, off the top of my head, they've got the HOA fees, but it goes towards having the beach and the lakefront, and the kids can access it. On the same note, it's really popular with a lot of families and growing families, and there's a lot of good use out of it. Or Mahogany, those are some nice neighbors in the south, and some older neighborhoods in the northwest, like Arbor Lake and Rocky Ridge. They're looking at the new YMCA or the accessibility to libraries or schools. Or some parks and places that kids can hang out, pathway systems so that their kids can ride their bikes around with friends and
Safely.
Yeah, safely.
Yep. Yep.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
What seems to be the, as far as amenities go, the big thing right now? Like if most people want to move somewhere that has insert
Something.
X, what would you say that would
I'm
be?
finding a lot of people really want a lake community. They are going to.
Because Calgary's getting hotter.
It's hotter, drier,
like
but
it's getting hotter.
it's also that they just want a place to dump their kids so they can play, right?
Sure.
And not have to worry, and something safe. So that's good to know too, because not a lot of people think about some of the communities that are a little bit older, like Lake Bonavista or Minnepore, where there's lakes, or Sundance, where there's water accessibility. People just right off the top think of Mahogany and Auburn Bay in the south, and they just want to go that ways, which is nice, but they're overcrowded sometimes. So you want to go into, a quieter area, or where you can enjoy it and you don't feel like you're fighting for a spot.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, I think, go ahead.
Do you have a database that you keep, or is this something that is experience based? Is this
So,
something that whatever client of the time, it refreshes you and you carry that with you moving forward? Because that's how a lot of us do it.
I know, and this is where I fail at record keeping and database. But I also think that it's really important that even though you keep that, I lock it in my head kind of
Yes.
through just experience. But I find that, if you point your clients in the right direction of where to get the information, which I have links to and I can share them with you guys.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
That you can point the clients in that direction, and they can read up on it themselves. I was just, looking at the sites for one of my clients, and they do have a school designated for an area they're looking for, but it actually has a little asterisk, and you're looking deeper, and it says only a certain number of kids can go to this school, and otherwise they get sent somewhere else. And then you Google that and go further, and that's an hour away. So do they really want to do that? That's all. It's always changing, and it's very organic. So you want to make sure.
Oh, it's
that-
interesting. You said the Fraser Institute. I'm sure you have a link to that. How heavily do you rely on the Calgary Board of Education website when?
I go back to back, I'll open both screens at the same time, and I'm constantly comparing where the school is to the community. And, when the list comes out in January, February, March, I click on each of the schools to see where the locations are, because that people will follow a trend.
Yep.
And so you kind of start looking at those communities and offering those as really good places to be.
So I'm curious right now, just because you would have recently done this, as far as communities go for education, if somebody didn't care where in the city they lived, but it was totally education focused, what would be a few communities that you would instantly name drop?
Well, a lot of people think that going to the private schools on the west side are like right off the bat, like this is where we need to be. But some surprising ones would be like Louis Pasteur, which is a French immersion school. That's over by Altadore, Marteloup area, and it's a really good one that seems to be trending up. They never used to make the list, and I think they've got the enough kids going there now.
The right principal, the right teachers.
Yeah, and I think they're trending upwards. And surprisingly, there's a couple schools in Bowness that are coming up, and a lot of people are, wondering why, just because of the demographic. But again, I think it's less people going to the schools, the numbers and teacher to student ratio is helping them as well. So.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, what's interesting is we have our son and our other children. They'll be going to a Spanish bilingual school.
Yeah.
So we're one of the people that were impacted by ridiculous bus times. I mean, 80 minutes one way
I remember
last
that
year.
you were saying that.
Yeah, and it got improved this year. But at the end of the day, a lot of parents need to understand that if they're going to a certain community and they're going to be bused, the bus times don't officially come out until the beginning of the school year. So, you got to hope for the best, but understand that there might be a bus ride involved or two.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but it is what it is. Community, amenities, school, you got to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you for that. Thanks, Jemmy. This is
Thanks.
such important
Thanks for
stuff
having
that
me.
we always talk about, kind of the technical side of real estate. But you are so great at what you do, and I think it's this information that really that's invaluable, right? Like this
Thank
thorough
you.
knowledge is just, it's not practice-based, it's not skill-based. It's you can't make up the wealth of knowledge when you piece all this stuff together. So if you could share some of your links with us, that'd
sure.
be amazing, because then we can share them with you guys, so you guys can start becoming little mini Jemmies, should you be so lucky. And but yeah, sorry we're a few minutes over today. My apologies, but thank you for sticking with us, and we hope that you all have a really great week, and we will see you next week for our Agent Pursuit meeting. And next week on Agent Pursuit, we're going to have 2 rookies that are coming in to talk to us, and these are people that within their first 2 years of real estate absolutely knocked it out of the park, which 1 is not easy to do, and 2, even if you've been in the business 3-4 years, some people still haven't been able to drum up the business, make the databases, put these systems in place. So this is going to be a great way to look from a fresh perspective of what you guys can do as if you were starting from ground zero to have a really successful next year. So tune into that, and we'll see you next week.